Hey, welcome to the final tutorial for the Agile testing. The topic is techniques in Agile project. Now, in this tutorial, we are going to talk about where we left in the last slides or the last tutorial. That what can be the acceptance criteria, adequate coverage, and other information for testing. So, we will cover here step by steps all the areas of acceptance criteria, adequate coverage, and other information on testing. So the Agile projects outline initial requirement as user stories in prioritized backlog at the start of the project. Now the user story serves as an important test basis. Now other possible test bases can be experience from previous project. It could be existing functions, feature, and quality characteristics of the system. It could be code, architecture, and design. Then user profile, information on defects from existing and previous project, categorizations of defects in a defect taxonomy, applicable standards, and quality risk. Now, during each iterations, developers create code which implements the function and feature described in the user story with the relevant quality characteristics, and this code is verified and validated via acceptance testing. Now to be testable, acceptance criteria should address few topics. It could be those topics are, let's say, functional behavior, quality characteristics, scenarios, business rules, external interface, constraints, data definitions, and so on. Now, in addition to the user stories and their associated acceptance criteria, other information is relevant for the tester. It could be how the system is supposed to work and be used, the system interfaces that can be used or accessed to test system, whether the current tool support is sufficient or not, whether the tester has enough knowledge and skills to perform the necessary test, and so on. Now, the concept of definition of done is critical in Agile test project, and it applies in a number of different ways. So we're gonna talk about let's say it could be subsections. Let's talk about let's say test level. Now, a definition of done. What is the test level? So each test level has its own definition of done. There could be many examples, like unit testing. Now 100% decision coverage. Let's say in unit testing you can say no unresolved major defect, no unacceptable technique that remain, all code unit test and unit test results reviewed, all unit test automated. These are the tick box, these are the check box you can mark and under the title unit test. This could be your definition of done, that 100% decision coverage where possible with careful reviews should be covered. Now in terms of let's say definition of done for the integration testing, it could be all functional requirement tested, all interfaces between unit tested, all quality risk covered, all defect found are reported, all regression test automated, and so on. Then system testing criteria for definition of done. So end-to-end test of user stories, features, and function. It could be all user persons covered. The most important quality characteristics of the system has been covered. All defects found are reported and possibly fixed. No unresolved major defects. So this is all about like a definition of done. The user stories. Now the definition of done for the user story may be determined by the criteria like the user stories selected for the iterations are complete, understood by the team, and have detailed testable acceptance criteria. All the elements of the user stories are being specified and reviewed, including the user story acceptance test, have been completed, and so on. Could be like tasks necessary to implement and test the selected user stories has been identified and estimated by the team. Now the next one, which is a feature one. Now the definition of done for the feature, which may, let's say, span multiple user stories or the epic. It could be the design is complete with no non-technical date, the code is complete with no non-technical date, no major defects remain to be corrected, feature documentation is complete, which may include release notes, user manuals, and online help function, and so on. Then the iteration. So the definition of done for the iteration may include all features for the iterations are ready and individually tested according to the feature level criteria. Integration of all features for the iterations completed and tested. Documentation written, reviewed, and approved. So these are the example for the iteration. The next one, which is a release. So the definition of done for the release. This is very important. Let's say a coverage. All relevant test basis elements for all contents of the release has been covered by testing. Quality. The defect intensity, the defect density, time, then cost. So these are few examples we can say for the definition of done. Let's move on to the next one, which is applying acceptance test driven development. Now acceptance test driven development is a test first approach. Means the test cases are created prior to the implementing the user story, and the users and the test cases are created by the Agile team, including developers, testers, business representatives, could be manual or automated. Now the first step is a specification workshop where the user story is analyzed, discussed, and written by the developer, testers, and business representative. So these are the steps actually, to be honest. The next step is to create the test. Then typically we can confirm the correct behavior without exceptions or the error condition. Let's move on to the next one, which is a functional and non-functional black box test design. This is important one. So let's say in an agile testing, many tests are created by the tester concurrently with the developer's programming activities. Now just as the developers are programming based on the user stories and acceptance criteria, and so are the testers creating tests which are based on their user stories and their acceptance criteria. Now testers can apply traditional black box test design techniques such as equivalence partitioning. There are 5: boundary value analysis, decision table, state of transitions, and so on. Now in many situations, non-functional requirement can be documented as user stories. Now black box test design technique can also be used to create tests for non-functional quality characteristics. So the user story might contain performance or the reliability requirement. So for example, a given execution cannot exceed a time limit, or a number of operations may fail less than a certain number of times. So these are the few examples. Now the next one, exploratory testing and agile testing. Now exploratory testing is important in agile project due to the limited time available, where you use your experience as a base of testing. A test character may include many information, for example, actor, purpose, setup, priorities, reference, data, notes, variations, and so on. The quality of the test depends on testers' ability to ask relevant questions about what to test. So for example, what is the most important to find out about the system? What happens if something happens? What should happen when something happens like this? And like a happy criteria, happy path, sad path, edge cases, and so on. It is important for the tester to document the process as much as possible, like test coverage, what input data has been used, how much has been covered, and how much remains to be tested, like evaluation notes, risk and strategy list, issues, questions, anomalies, actual behavior, and so on. Now, the last bit, which is the tools in Agile project. Now, tools described in the foundation level syllabus could be relevant to the testers and Agile teams. They are all like independent. It's a big area to cover, but let's talk about few of them. Let's say task management and tracking tools. Now, what are those? So in some cases, Agile teams use physical story or the task board, like a whiteboard, to manage and track user stories, test, and other tasks throughout each sprint. Now, other teams will use application lifecycle management and task management software, including electronic task board. Now, these tools serves many purposes like record stories and their relevant development and task, capture team members' estimates on their task, associate development task and test task with the same story to provide a complete picture of the team's efforts required to implement the story. So these are all bits like aggregate developer and tester updates to the task status as they complete their work. So these all purposes comes under the task management and tracking tools. The next one, which is a communication and information sharing tool. Now, wikis allows teams to build and share an online knowledge base on various aspects of the project. Same way, like instant messaging, audio, teleconferencing, and video chat tools, and it's like a big area. But these are the few bits we can cover for in this tutorial. Then we can say it's a software build and distribution tool. Then configuration management tool. Now, configuration management tool may be used not only to store source code and automated test, but manual test and other test works product are often be stored in the same repository as the product source code. Now, this provides traceability between which version of the software were tested with which particular version of the test and so on. Now, next one is test design, implementation, and execution tool. Now, some tools are useful to Agile tester at specific point in the software testing process. While most of these tools are not new or the specific to Agile, they provide important capabilities given the rapid change of Agile project. What it can be. So let's say test design tool, test case management tool, test data preparation and generation tools, test data load tools, automation test execution tools, exploratory test tools. Now these all are the tools. And the final bit, which is a cloud computing and virtualization tool. Now, virtualization allows a single physical resources or the server to operate as many separate smaller resources. When virtual machines or the cloud instances are used, teams have a greater number of servers available to them for development and testing. So this can help to avoid delays associated with the waiting for a physical server. Provisioning a new server or restoring a server is more efficient with snapshot capabilities built into the most virtualization tool. Now, some test management tools now utilize this virtualization technology to snapshot server at the point when a fault is detected, allowing tester to share the snapshot with the developers investigating the fault. Well, this is all about that. The reference for this whole tutorial is like a software considerations in airborne system and equipment certifications which were published in 92. I also used a reference from ISTQB documentation, There are many books which, as a support, I used, which is acceptance testing, business blue holes press, and so many different versions and reference. I used agile terminology guide from different websites and few of the references, just to make sure that I can cover as much as for the agile testing, for the certification, for the professional. Now thank you very much for watching this tutorial. This is the end of the tutorial for agile tester certification and agile testing concept and philosophy.